Tonight on NewsCenter. In what appears to be armed protests, North Korea fires several projectiles into the sea, the 15th in 2 weeks, amid concerns that it's ready to conduct another nuclear test. Senior officials of South Korea and the U.S. kick off their first meeting dealing exclusively with implementing new sanctions on North Korea. And Ebola, Cuba. Barack Obama becomes the first U.S. president in 88 years to step on Cuban soil. He's scheduled to hold bilateral talks with Raul Castro this Monday. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 9 a.m. in Havana, 2 p.m. in Stockholm, and 10 on a Monday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. Now, Korea's political parties are scrambling to get into campaign mode with just a little over 3 weeks left until the legislative elections in April. But with each party mired in conflicts over their candidate nominations, nothing seems certain at this point. Our parliamentary correspondent Shin Se-min brings us up to speed on the latest in domestic politics.
The ruling Saenuri Party held a closed-door council meeting Monday morning as the process of whittling down the final few candidates continues. The party has remained mum on whether Yoo Seung-min, the party's former floor leader, will be put forward or not. The political heavyweight has a previous record of clashing with President Park Geun-hye over the administration's promise to expand social welfare without raising taxes. The party's nomination committee chairman, Lee Han-gu, a key President Park ally, revealed late Sunday that the committee is waiting for Yoo to step away from the nomination process voluntarily. On the other side of the political spectrum, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea has revealed its latest set of candidates for the April 13th election. The party has its own issues, though. Some in the party are upset that interim leader Kim Jong-in has been nominated for yet another proportional representative seat, marking the 5th in his political career. In response, Kim refused to participate in party affairs on Monday, saying that he does not want to return to a party where he is mistreated over such a decision. The minor opposition People's Party is also facing dissent within its ranks over its nomination process, which has kept it from finalizing its proportional representative list. Party supporters, unhappy with the camp's decisions, barged into its Supreme Council meeting Monday to express their discontent. The infighting at the parliament is backfiring on the political parties as the approval ratings for the ruling Saenuri Party edged down, according to a recent pollster on Monday. But the nomination feud is likely to continue for the time being, or at least until the candidate registration session begins later this week. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Well, President Park Geun-hye has weighed in on the political strife, calling on the nation's political parties to remain focused on the people and the Korean people's livelihoods rather than the election. She also stressed that national unity is key to countering North Korean threats. Our top office correspondent Song Ji-san has more on the senior secretaries meeting at Cheongwade this Monday.
President Park warned that by taking their eye off recovery efforts, Korea could once again slide into turmoil similar to that experienced during the 1997 Asian financial crisis that rocked Korea and most of Asia. With a handful of economy-reviving bills pending at the National Assembly, she called on her senior secretaries and politicians to do what they can to improve the people's livelihoods, saying the economic clock should not be stopped for the election.
지금 선거 때문에 많은 것이 멈춰 있지만 정치가 멈춘다고 경제도 멈추고 민생도 멈춰서는 안 될 것입니다. 가장 중요한 것은 민생이라는 것을 우리가 잊어서는 안 됩니다.
With the possibility of the North conducting a 5th nuclear test at any moment, President Park said national unity is what will stop Pyongyang's acts of aggression. She noted that over 5,000 South Koreans have died as a result of North Korean provocations since the Korean War ended. The president also said a ceremony will be held on Friday to commemorate those who died protecting the West Sea, with the 6th anniversary of North Korea's sinking of South warship Cheonan falling on Saturday. Bak stressed the importance of readiness both on the diplomatic and military fronts in response to North's reckless provocations and added that Seoul's diplomacy on the international stage will decide the future of the Korean peninsula and the unification of the two Koreas. 송지선, Arirang News.
North Korea launched several short-range missiles into the East Sea earlier this afternoon, just 3 days after the regime sent 2 mid-range missiles skyward. It's the latest in a series of provocations that appear to be armed protests against the annual military drills between South Korea and the U.S. that have continued this month and last. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin files this report.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said that North Korea launched 5 missiles on Monday from a location near the northeastern city of Hamhung in the North Hamgyeongnam-do province. The missiles flew around 200 kilometers before falling into the East Sea, and experts believe the missiles were fired from the North's new 300mm multiple rocket launcher. And this is the North's 3rd missile launch in less than 2 weeks, with the latest launch of 2 mid-range missiles having come just 3 days before. Shortly after the missile launch on Monday, regional powers were quick to weigh in. China's foreign ministry called on North Korea to stop violating UN resolutions banning such launches. It also called on all relevant parties to exercise restraint and not aggravate tensions. Similarly, the U.S. Special Envoy for the Six-Party Talks, Sung Kim, who is in Seoul for talks on the sanctions on North Korea, also called on Pyongyang to stop all provocations that violate UN resolutions. South Korea's Air Force responded to the North's latest provocation by conducting a large-scale drill, targeting the regime's nuclear and missile facilities.
If North Korea launches another provocation, we will counter it with our airborne firepower and end their will to start a war.
The regime has launched 15 missiles since sending a satellite into space atop a long-range missile in early February. Military officials in Seoul believe the latest provocations represent an armed protest against the annual military drills between Seoul and Washington. North Korea says the drills are a rehearsal for an invasion, while South Korea and the U.S. say they are purely defensive in nature. The drills are expected to continue through the end of April. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, as Pyongyang continues to ratchet up tensions in the Korean peninsula with those missile launches, South Korea remains vigilant as recent satellite imagery indicates that another nuclear test is possible. Well, although experts do not believe it's all that likely, the South Korean government isn't ruling anything out. Our Connie Kim reports.
North Korea fired 6 short-range projectiles in the East Sea soon after the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed its strongest sanctions to date on North Korea in response to its nuclear and long-range missile tests. Over the 3-week period, Pyongyang launched short and mid-range ballistic missiles in an apparent protest to the annual South Korea-U.S. military drills. North Korea continued its belligerent rhetoric through its official newspaper, Nodongshinmun, on Monday, calling the joint exercises a desperate attempt of the mentally weak. Adding to the growing concerns, the U.S.-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North recently cited satellite imagery, showing that the Punggye-ri nuclear test site remains active and is capable of supporting additional tests at any time. The test site is where Pyongyang conducted its 4th nuclear test in January. Seoul says it's also keeping close tabs on the possibility of a 5th nuclear test.
North Korea is capable of carrying out a 5th nuclear test immediately. Seoul is preparing for every possibility.
However, many experts doubt that North Korea will carry out another nuclear test anytime soon.
It hasn't been that long since North Korea conducted a nuclear test. Considering that the next test needs to be an actual hydrogen bomb test, it's unlikely Pyongyang will conduct an additional nuclear test in that short a period of time.
Although Pyongyang isn't expected to conduct a nuclear test anytime soon, the general consensus is that the North Korean leader will continue to order the firing of missiles to gain the attention of Seoul and the international community. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, for the first time ever, senior officials from South Korea and the U.S. have met exclusively to discuss North Korea sanctions. During the first round of talks held in Seoul today, the two sides agreed to make sure all countries fulfill implementation and enforcement pledges of relevant sanctions on North Korea. Our foreign affairs correspondent Kwon So-ah has this report.
Seoul and Washington are giving their full vigor and energy to implementing the sanctions on North Korea. That's what U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy Sung Kim said after what he called a very productive session with his South Korean counterpart Kim Hong-gyun and other officials at Seoul's Foreign Ministry on Monday. According to the ministry, the two allies focused on three main points: the implementation of the latest UN Security Council resolution, the other unilateral sanctions, and enforcing pressure on North Korea at the international level.
We continue our closest possible communication and coordination with the Republic of Korea. And both countries are also reaching out to others in the region and beyond to ensure that everyone is implementing this important resolution fully.
When asked for an assessment of China's stance on the matter, Kim said Beijing made very clear it intends to fully implement all provisions of the resolution. What's notable about Monday's bilateral talks is they were the first of their kind with a sole focus on the North Korea sanctions. That's why they were also attended by U.S. Treasury and State Department officials, including the coordinator for sanctions policy, Daniel Fried. He was also responsible for explaining the additional U.S. sanctions, which were somewhat ambiguous as to the range of people and organizations covered, especially with regard to the employment of North Korean workers abroad.
The new executive order from last week provides very broad authorities to deal with the issue of exportation of labor. And it doesn't mandate anything in particular, but the authorities are there if needed.
Fried also said the U.S. sanctions are designed to be used as a platform to advance the purposes of the latest UN Resolution 2270. Continuing talks regarding implementation of sanctions on North Korea, as well as other ways to pressure the regime, are expected to be discussed during a separate meeting at the ministry Tuesday between South Korea's top nuclear chief Kim Hong-gyun and his U.S. counterpart Sung Kim. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea and Japan are set to hold working-level talks to follow up on last year's landmark agreement on the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. Now, Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry announced today that the meeting will take place in Tokyo on Tuesday, led by its newly appointed Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs, Chung Byung-won, and his Japanese counterpart, Kimihiro Ishikane. Now, the expected topics to be discussed: follow-up measures on the implementation of the December 20th deal, which includes creating a Korean fund through which the Japanese government is to compensate the victims of Japan's wartime atrocities. Ebola Cuba, or What's Up Cuba, is what U.S. President Barack Obama tweeted as he landed in the island nation, marking the end of one era and beginning of another. Mr. Obama's three-day trip marks the first U.S. presidential visit to the Caribbean island since 1928 and a significant step forward for the former Cold War foes. Our Hwang Ho-jun has this story.
It took 3 days by battleship for then U.S. President Calvin Coolidge to reach Cuban soil in 1923. Fast forward 88 years. On Sunday, Air Force One landed in Havana for the first time ever, 3 hours after takeoff from Washington. This is the second time a sitting U.S. president has visited Cuba and the first to address its citizens.
This is a historic visit, and it's a historic opportunity to engage directly with the Cuban people and to forge new agreements and commercial deals, to build new ties between our two peoples.
Many Cubans braved the rain to welcome the first family of the U.S., hoping the visit will boost the ailing economy.
The economic embargo imposed on Cuba by the United States has become the biggest barrier to Cuban economic development and has caused $121 billion of losses for Cuba.
Fidel Castro's coup and rise to power in 1959 began 5 decades of tension between the neighboring countries. The U.S. unsuccessfully attempted to overthrow the Castro government through the Bay of Pigs invasion, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the closest the Cold War came to escalating into a full-scale nuclear war. The U.S. subsequently imposed a full embargo against Cuba lasting more than 50 years. It wasn't until the end of 2014 when the U.S. announced its intent to normalize diplomatic ties. Monday local time, the U.S. president will meet with current Cuban president Raul Castro. Obama will also attend an exhibition baseball game and is scheduled to meet with the leaders of political dissidents. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Well, the U.S. president's historic visit to Vienna could have far-reaching implications for ties between the two countries after a more than half a century of hostility. It's also invited comparisons to the U.S. relationship with North Korea and raised the question of whether the U.S. message of engagement will reverberate all the way to Pyongyang. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
Cuba and North Korea are two of the world's last remaining socialist countries, but they are on two very different and in some ways opposite paths. On Sunday, U.S. President Barack Obama made a historic visit to Cuba 15 months after the two countries announced a normalization of relations and following decades of animosity between the former Cold War adversaries. Ahead of the trip, Obama had announced the U.S. would ease travel restrictions for U.S. citizens and restore Cuba's access to the international financial system. On the other hand, North Korea is further isolating itself from the international community with its latest nuclear test and subsequent missile launches. It is hoped that the latest sanctions by the UN and individual countries, including the U.S. and South Korea, will go some way toward making North Korea change for the better. But missile launches in recent days have cast a shadow over those efforts. Backtracking a bit, North Korea was one of the country's former U.S. President George W. Bush pointed to in his axis of evil, along with Iran and Iraq to describe countries seeking weapons of mass destruction. And Cuba was part of a subgroup beyond the original three. Now both Iran and Cuba are beginning to normalize their relations with the United States, but experts say North Korea doesn't seem to have gotten the message yet.
Changes are occurring in all these places except for North Korea. So North Korea is becoming increasingly an isolated case, unlike some of these other countries. I think it sends a clear message to North Korea that the United States is willing to negotiate with some of these states if the North Korean regime is willing to give up its nuclear ambitions.
The expert says, however, for the regime, survival is a central objective, and if the regime is surviving, the current status quo of nuclearization and economic development will not change. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, shifting our focus, some alarming figure over Korea's household debt problem has been released. According to a new international report, Korea's household debt is rising at one of the fastest rates among emerging economies. For the numbers and more, here's Hwang Ji-hye.
Korea's household debt rose at the second fastest pace among 19 emerging economies last year. According to a new quarterly report by the Institute of International Finance, the household debt to GDP ratio rose over 3 percentage points in 2015 from a year ago, following closely behind China. The household debt burden on the population was also the third highest, following Singapore and Hong Kong, with the average amount of Korea's household debt per person standing at $29,000. Korea's record low key rate of 1.5%, coupled with a set of aggressive stimulus measures last year that included packages to prop up the country's real estate market, have been stoking concerns of a worsening household debt problem. The Bank of Korea says the amount of debt currently stands at around $1 trillion, taking a toll on the country's overall spending. With that, the government last month introduced new guidelines that toughen lending requirements, and experts say such measures will prevent the debt issue from dampening the country's overall growth potential.
As long as the quality of debt is improved case by case, even if the overall amount increases a little, each household will be able to better manage it.
Still, many experts cite the snowballing household debt issue as a potential risk to the Korean economy. The Institute of International Finance also says that the pace of growth is alarming, which needs close monitoring. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
An interesting trend here in Korea, the number of full-time homemakers in this country is falling as more women join the workforce. The latest data bucks a decade-long trend which had seen the number of stay-at-home moms swell. Our Kim Min-ji takes a look at this trend.
Jo Ju-yeon has been working for 8 years. She is one of a growing number of women in Korea who have decided to stay in the workforce instead of giving up on a career after getting married and having a child.
There are money matters too, but besides that, my husband has been helpful in doing his part. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to take maternity leave despite there being a policy due to the disadvantages I may face upon coming back to work.
Many women like George choosing to work, as it's becoming difficult for families to make ends meet with just one spouse working, and sometimes, depending on the company, women lose their jobs after maternity leave or don't get paid leave for a certain period upon their return. All of this combined means the number of homemakers is on the decline. Statistics Korea says the number of full-time homemakers came to around 7 million last year, down 0.8% from a year ago. That's down for the second straight year following a 2.1% drop in 2014, the first since relevant data began to be compiled in 2000. In turn, the number of economically active women is on the rise. In the 25 to 54 age group, the percentage of working and married women rose from under 50% in 1990 to almost 60% last year. Although it's a significant jump, the big picture isn't all that rosy. The majority of workers in their 40s and 50s are in temporary positions, and the percentage of working women ages 15 to 64 is 55.7%, below the OECD average of 58%.
At the end of the day, policy shouldn't just be aimed at bringing women back into the workforce. Like some advanced countries, Korea needs to make paternity leave compulsory. There needs to be a dual caregiving system where men do their share of roles typically assigned to women. This approach will not only encourage women to work, but will also help the low birth rate issue.
The Korean government is hoping to raise the percentage of women in the workforce to nearly 62% by 2017, but experts say that instead of taking steps to boost the figure in the short term, more constructive policies will be needed to improve the situation over the long term. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Well, did you know that it's World Poetry Day today? The UN's Cultural and Educational Arm, or UNESCO, has set March 21st as a day to recognize poets all around the world. A secondary goal is to support linguistic diversity, and here in Korea, the poet everyone is talking about is Yoon Dong-ju, known for his moving compositions during Korea's years under Japanese colonial rule. This report from our Oh Soo-young.
Plum blossoms are in full bloom in Korea, heralding the arrival of spring. As they bud in winter, withstanding the freezing conditions, the flowers have come to represent virtuous scholars throughout history who endured great hardship during their lives. One such celebrated figure is Yoon Dong-ju, a poet known for his lyrical compositions and resistance against Japan's brutal occupation. To commemorate Yoon's legacy, a public concert was held over the weekend in a village flush with plum blossoms. His best-loved works were recited by singer Yoon Young-ju, who is also the poet's second cousin. The singer also paid tribute to his cousin with a song inspired by the poem Prologue.
His integrity in life was admirable, even to his family members, and his love for our country and people shines in his poems, expressed through internal resistance, not conflict.
Yoon grew up during the height of the colonial era, when Koreans were oppressed by Japan's military authorities. From the age of 17, Yoon expressed his torment over this suppression and his hope for a liberated Korea, under the theme of The Sky, the Wind and the Stars, the title of his anthology. But his poems couldn't be published as Japanese authorities banned Koreans from using their own language. But Yoon refused to be silenced. He entrusted this manuscript to his younger friend Jeon Byung-woo, who preserved the text underneath these floorboards in a house in Gwangyang City, Jeollanam-do province. Yoon would never see his poems published nor his country freed. He died at the age of 28 in a Japanese prison where he was sentenced for his role in the Korean independence movement. His anthology was published in 1948, 3 years after his death and Korea's liberation. Since then, his works have become a timeless source of inspiration for modern Koreans, especially in recent weeks among young people.
There are so many beautiful poems that I love. You can see how he kept our literature alive in a suppressed society. It's impressive how he wasn't swayed by his surroundings, but confidently voiced his emotions.
It's moving and sad. It makes me proud as a Korean and grateful to live in this generation.
A movie on his life titled Dongju hit local cinemas last month, sweeping box offices with ticket sales of more than 1 million. Also, sales of his anthology spiked in February, making the bestseller list in most large bookstores. 71 years after his death, Yoon Dong-ju's delicate yet earnest words continue to speak to Koreans today. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Gwangyang.
Well, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg appears to be trying bit by bit to re-enter the world's largest internet population, China. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Now, Bruce, what was Zuckerberg's latest move in his charm offensive to reintroduce Facebook to China?
He had an important meeting, Kanyang, and a rare meeting, too. I don't know too much, but according to China's Xinhua news agency, he met with China's chief of propaganda, Lu Yunshan, in Beijing. And Xinhua said Lu praised Facebook's technology and management methods during that meeting.
Well, Bruce, so would it be safe to say that this is a sign China may be warming up to Facebook or those similar companies of like, even as the government there tightens its internet censorship?
Yeah, Facebook isn't the only one on the outs right now, but Lu is an important person to meet in that regard. But Zuckerberg never commented directly during his trip about Facebook doing business in China. China is one of the few markets where Facebook is unavailable right now because of government censors that advocate online content publishers should promote core socialist values. Zuckerberg was in Beijing for the China Development Forum. The state-sponsored conference brings together top business executives and the country's ruling elite. The Facebook CEO spoke positively about China's long-term job prospects.
But in general, we're seeing a huge constraint around the world on the number of good engineers who are graduating from universities. And I think that this is something that China has gotten really right by emphasizing for a long time.
Zuckerberg shared the stage with Jack Ma, the founder and executive chairman of Alibaba Group.
The past 30 years, China being had a wonderful time. Next, we have to pay the price. For the wonderful time, you have to pay the price. For the terrible time, you also pay the price.
Ma referring to China's down economy right now. Beijing blocked Facebook in 2008, a year after it launched in China. To get back into China's online sphere, Zuckerberg also met with China's internet policy chief and President Xi Jinping last fall. Migrants flooded into Greece by boat on Monday, the first day of a deal between the European Union and Turkey to stem the flow of migrants into the European bloc. Under the deal, Turkey has agreed to take back all illegal migrants who cross into Greece. In return, the EU will take in thousands of Syrian refugees directly from Turkey and reward the country with more money and allow its citizens visa-free travel. But for the migrants themselves, the prospect of a new life in Europe still outweighs the threat of being sent back to Turkey.
My wife and my son in Germany. Okay, I want to go Germany, inshallah.
At least 18 Turkish officials arrived on the Greek island of Lesbos on Monday to help implement the deal. Greek authorities say more than 1,600 people arrived on Greek islands by boat on that same day, twice the amount the day before.
Now, Bruce, a little bit upper Europe, in Sweden, there's a new store where you're both the shopper and the clerk. And this is all thanks to smart technology. So enlighten me, how does this work?
Sure, well, this Swede this is the invention of a Swede, and he needed to get baby food one night. And all the stores were closed. So he said, I've got an idea. And basically what he did is he created a store where you can scan items with a smartphone app, which is linked to the user's bank account.
It's open 24/7, so you're able to
get necessary products that you probably forgot in the store or that you feel like having it late at night or early in the morning before the stores, the other grocery stores have opened.
Security is fairly limited. A credit check is done on new members. The owner is already thinking about expanding. He said business has been good so far.
Bruce, this could be the beginning of a fourth industrial revolution that we've been talking about, really changing the way we live our lives with the help of smart technology.
Sure. One of the reasons this has worked so far is because costs are down because they don't have any staff members. It's all done through smart technology.
Right. Well, hopefully there still is some role left for humans to do, and that we will be ready for smart technology to take over when the time comes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Bruce, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Well, it was one warm, toasty day here in the Korean capital, but for more on the weather details, let's head straight over to our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Now, Ji-hyun, the beautiful spring conditions are certainly welcome, but really I cannot say the same about the fine dust levels that seem to be on the increase.
Hello, Ganyang. Yes, in fact, the dust levels remained high in the metro area all day long today with stagnant air circulation.
You know, Ji-hyun, I definitely felt all that dust in the air today. It seems that less than pleasant air quality comes hand in hand with milder temperatures.
That's right, and tomorrow should be pretty much a repeat of the conditions we saw today, meaning the capital area will have high levels of fine dust once again, so be sure to have a mask handy tomorrow, and these are due to a lack of air circulation and the arrival of toxic dust from China. Now, temperatures will be slightly lower than today and still above the seasonal averages here in the capital, but we'll have mostly sunny skies most of the time across the nation. So on that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. Daily low here in Seoul and Daegu will kick off at 4 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju will kick off at 9 and 7. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will top out at 14 degrees Celsius, but very mild over in Daegu, topping out at 20 and 19 over in Busan. Now, there should be a gradual drop in temperatures this week, bringing us back to what it should be like at this time of the year. But due to relatively mild conditions we've been having lately, it could feel a little bit breezier and chillier. So be sure to dress in layers to avoid catching a cold. Now, that's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that is our broadcast on this Monday. From North Korea's much too frequent show of protests and the pandemonium of Korean politics to the beautiful and inspirational poems by poet Yoon Dong-ju, we had a variety of stories to bring you this evening. Hope tomorrow is a better day for you, for me, for all of us. I'm Moon Ganyang. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you right back here same time tomorrow on NEWSCENTER.